Daylight revealed the horror of the crash. The Ford Falcon sedan missing the Burwood Road corner at high speed, careering side-on into a telegraph pole. The passenger's side took the full brunt of the impact. 15-year-old Merriweather girl Sarah Marnie killed instantly. It took emergency services some time to release the teenager's body. The 19-year-old driver suffered severe head and internal injuries. He's in a critical condition in the John Hunter Hospital. Another passenger, a 16-year-old redhead girl, escaped with minor injuries. Despite a massive slow-down campaign on the long weekend, police were today again warning of the dangers of speeding, especially on back roads.
When we're looking at Burwood Road here, the Highway Patrol people from Charlestown continually police this section of road here because it is a complaint section. It is a section where accidents are experienced, and they continually set up here monitoring the driver for random breath testing and also for radar speed detection.
The Accident Investigation Squad is continuing its inquiries. Matthew White, NBN News.
It's posters like these that have Alderman Gumaz in a lather. Advertisements for the so-called girly magazines for all the world to see.
Children have got enough pressures today without having to look at that.
Alderman Gumaz isn't opposed to speaking out. A couple of years ago, she attracted national attention when she objected to a mother publicly breastfeeding at one of the Alderman's 2 movie theatres. In this latest call, some are saying it's a touch ironic that a theatre owner who runs R-rated movies can be campaigning against pornography.
Some of the films, and particularly some of the European films, would have women in them that maybe didn't have all of their clothes on, but most of them look extremely attractive.
Alderman Gumaz says pornography is in the eye of the beholder. She's not opposed to tasteful nudity and respects the right of adults to view whatever is legally available. But the newsagents believe council should stick to paving roads and caring for parks. Neil Fletcher says the posters are harmless.
In our particular case, I guess there'd be a couple of hundred children pass by here every day, and I don't see too many of them stopping and leering at the posters. They're too busy riding their skateboards or whatever.
A pornography-free zone has been set up in the Shoalhaven Shire. Maitland aldermen are discussing the possibility. Newcastle Council is yet to make a decision on the matter. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
This document details the planned city dump and the effect it would have on the nearby residences of Maryland and Wallsend. Lord Mayor John McNaughton says it supports council's earlier claims.
We already knew that. That's why we chose the site. There'll be no impact on the residential areas at all.
Newcastle Council commissioned the EIS after the Land and Environment Court ruled its development application of the old mine site void. The resident group won that round and is determined to win the next.
Well, what they're talking about is that the site tends to be down into a gully, which is what the council is talking about. But the thing that we find is any extra traffic on the road, any extra rubbish on the road is not minimal in any way at all.
The document will be on display for 30 days. All submissions received during that time will be put to a commission of inquiry sometime in December. According to the Lord Mayor, the residents' protest against the dump has cost council around $500,000 and set the project back 2 years. The Lord Mayor says it's important the project goes ahead as soon as possible as the city is running out of dumping space.
The fact is that we are, as citizens, generating rubbish at an enormous rate day by day, and we've got to have somewhere to put that rubbish.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Chris Dill, Alex Morgan-Low and Marty McLean, just 3 who won't suit up for the Falcons next year. And there could be more. Peter Harvey has been offered a contract but hasn't signed, and Michael Johnson, Al Green and Everett Stevens haven't put pen to paper. In actual fact, the only player re-signed is Terry Dozier, and if he makes the New York Knicks NBA side, he won't be back. A change in the salary cap laws is half the problem for the club. Definitely heading off is Skylab, Neil Turner, and the 22-year-old isn't too upset.
There's been some weird times that happen that sort of hasn't been short of controversy or excitement, but I hope to be going somewhere a bit more stable now.
Already released by the Falcons, the towering Turner wants to play his brand of basketball elsewhere, but he does hold hopes for his team of 4 years.
We're not that bad, the Falcons team, and I don't know what they're doing at the moment. It sounds like they're sort of clearing shop, so I'd like to see the same sort of team stick around for a bit longer, see how they would have gone.
Turner has had the odd feeler from other clubs, but leading the charge could be Townsville, Brisbane or the Gold Coast.
I'd like to go somewhere warm. I like the beach, so somewhere in that sort of area.
In the glow of glasses brimming with Hunter White, Premier John Fahey confessed to the Maitland Chamber of Commerce luncheon that he's already well acquainted with the region's wines.
I have to say that in that little flight up a short time ago, I wish to God I had a bottle or two of red in my hand.
After praising one of the Hunter's best-known products, Mr Fahey told the audience a key to economic recovery is for each region to unite and push its strong points. One of Maitland's strong points, at least in Macquarie Street, is that it's a marginal political seat, which is partly what brought the Premier to the city.
Well, look, the fact that it's a marginal seat I won't ignore, but I also recognise that the Hunter, the lower Hunter particularly, has an enormous amount to contribute to the economy of New South Wales. In fact, it's contributed more than its share over the years and is still doing so.
While pressing the flesh and opening a new community resource centre in East Maitland, the Premier quashed claims that his government plans to privatise the city's hospital.
There is a cast iron guarantee. It will be a publicly funded and publicly operated hospital.
Mr Fahey says financing for the hospital's redevelopment has already begun, with $500,000 earmarked in this year's state budget for planning the project. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It was a big lift for triple qualifier Ian Barrett after yesterday's disappointment in the singles section of the state titles. Pairing with experienced campaigner George Dawes, Barrett and his skipper were never really troubled in this morning's semi-final. Up against Barrel's long-time district and zone champions Jeff Boothman and Ross Fahey, the Charlestown combination set up a handy lead and raced away to win 30 shots to 15 and advance to the final. In Monday's decider, Barrett and Dawes will meet Phil Bushby and Bob Dunn of the Torres Club on the south coast. Bushby and Dunn are club champions, as well as winners of numerous District and Zone 7 titles, and were outstanding against Peter Hawes and Fred Alexander of the St Ives Club in Sydney. Bushby and Dunn raced away to record a stunning 24-12 victory. And for many fans in and around Newcastle, it must be pleasing to see cricket back at the number one sports ground and the grandstands that were damaged in the earthquake under a total rebuilding program. Last season's premiers, Charlestown and Wooden Spooners Lambton New Lambton, set the backdrop to what promises to be a fascinating few months. The competition has seen quite a change, with many players changing clubs and some returning to the competition, such as Tony Fort, who returns to Stockton from Sydney. A heavy representative season will place a huge burden on some clubs, but all indications are that season 1992-93 will be a vintage year. It's the New England Dressage Festival at the Kennedy Street Complex, and they have come from Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania and of course New South Wales, chasing vital competition in preparation for the upcoming Australian titles. 70 entries will spend long stretches in the saddle as horse and rider work as one, trying for perfection and hoping to fuel the interest of eager onlookers.
It's always growing. It's just amazing. Once you get involved in it, there's a sort of fascination for it to do better, and it's just gradually getting bigger and bigger.
Event 7 was the Collecciones Prix St George, and Southport horseman Ricky McMillan aboard Wattsman outclassed their rivals to average 60.65% and grab first place. In second place, with an average of 56%, went to local Rachel Hunter riding Buccaneer.
It will replace the old system based around the value of property, but could see some residents paying up to 16% more in rates, depending on how much water is used. Hoping to encourage more controlled use of water, Moree Council approved the introduction of the system earlier this week.
The bottom line is to try and encourage the residents to be aware that now the emphasis has changed, that the ratepayer, perhaps for the first time, can actually manage their rate bill, because they will be determining what their rates are rather than council.
The urban encroachment into bushland areas has made life pretty tough for koalas, but in a bid to save them from being starved into extinction, local community groups with the backing of the council today planted what should prove to be a feed oasis. 300 trees were planted in just a few hours. They'll be tended by volunteers as part of an ongoing plan to establish feed corridors on council-owned land and reserves. But keeping up a ready supply of leaves is only half the battle. Nocturnal nibblers, koalas often fall prey to marauding domestic pets.
We're trying to get some community education going, that people realise that koalas are out at night and that they should have their pets locked up.
Get a bit of a sink.
Competitors grab your goomies. That's what they call these makeshift craft splashing through the suds at Coffs Harbour. After a day of heat, it's an anything-goes scramble. Out the back, crews trade shots with water and flower bombs. While some copped broadsides, others made a clean break for the beach. But the winners were reluctant to divulge any secrets about their superior hull design. Down at Port Macquarie, it was makeshift mayhem on the slopes of Tappenborough Mountain, where a long-standing score was settled in the Beechwood Hotel Billycart Classic. Mike Rumble and Nat Chi proved to have the perfect prescription to interrupt a 5-times winning spree by James and Jason Carroll. The Rumble and Chi cart, Carroll Enema, won the race in the record time of 7 minutes 11 seconds.
With a 20-knot headwind, conditions were more suited to a sailing regatta, but rowers from across the state took to the water at Raymond Terrace, starting a 16-kilometre torture run to Morpeth. Last year there were 50 boats competing, but thanks to the Barcelona Games, the numbers have almost doubled this year, and with good reason. The state coach was also on hand, running the rule over the talent.
Harold Yarling always makes a point of attending the higher quality regattas during the year, and he's here to see the look for a train-on squad during the year. And this is the first marathon of the year, which he'll be looking very hard at every competitor that's here.
The Glebe Club took out the overall point score, Mossman claimed the eights, and local rower Graham Nix won the single sculls. Matthew White, NBN News.
There are good buskers and there are bad buskers, but the very best of them were in Coffs Harbour last night for the grand finale of the Buskers Festival. Acts included magic, mime and jugglers on motorcycles. Some get by with a pocket full of hankies and a couple of sticks, but there's a distinction emerging between busking for a few bob and making a full-time living as a street performer. Shows such as this are growing in popularity for Aussie audiences, with performers always trying for that something new and original to free up the loose change.
For Canberra, a perfect start to the National Hockey League season. On Saturday, the Lakers battled before overcoming Tamworth 8-6. Yesterday, it was a different story. Canberra had to come from behind, but swamped the Frogs in the third quarter. The Lakers forced a series of penalty corners. Right half Andrew Aldens converted constantly, the final score 7-2. Winger Graham McLennan starred for Canberra. Matthew Smith stood out in a beaten side. For the Frogs, a forgettable weekend and a long trip home. Plenty of time to reflect on just one win from 4 outings. In accepting his second state title, St Ives bowler Peter Hawes said he'd done his bit for the grey-haired brigade. His tongue was planted firmly in his cheek, but there's no doubt his experience told over his younger counterpart. 7 millimetres of rain was dumped on the Gateshead Green last night, slowing it down considerably. Elderton, used to a faster surface, didn't adjust and was steamrolled 31-10 in an anticlimax. Earlier today, in the final of the state pairs, the Charlestown duo of Ian Barrett and George Dawes scraped home against South Coast pair Robert Dunn and Phil Bushby, 17-16.
A decade ago, the Yulin mine to the west of Newcastle near Mudgee was a greenfield site. The then Premier of New South Wales, Neville Wran, detonated the first charge, opening the earth for millions of tonnes of steaming coal, from what was later to become the largest longwall mining operation in Australia. The long-abandoned Sandy Hollow rail workings were reborn. Cement sleepers forged a $250 million link to the port of Newcastle. Since then, 40 million tonnes of coal have been freighted down the 275-kilometre line. State Rail introduced the 81 class locomotives. Hitched 3 in a row, they're used to haul trains of 72 wagons to the port. Next year, Ulan will begin a 15-year contract to supply 1 million tonnes of coal a year to the Eraring Power Station on the Central Coast.
Dr Graham Vimpani is internationally recognised as an expert in the effects lead has on the development of children. He's carried out studies in Boolaroo and in the South Australian smelter town of Port Pirie. At last week's conference in Melbourne, Dr Vimpani was among 40 world experts who reached consensus on the effect of lead from petrol, paint and industry.
Effect of lead on children's intelligence being in the order of 0 to 5 IQ points for every 10 micrograms per decilitre rise in blood lead. And we believe that the most likely effect is a drop in IQ of about 2 to 3 points.
There's been much debate on the subject, but now most agree that along with social class and the intelligence of parents, lead is a significant factor in determining the IQ of a child.
We reckon that genetic factors probably account for about 50% of intelligence, and social factors account for another 20%. And we think that lead probably contributes somewhere in the order of 1 to 4% over and above those two major groupings.
The next step now is reducing the level of concern to match that in the United States. Ours currently is 25 micrograms of lead per decilitre of blood, compared with a level of 10 overseas. Dr Vinpani says the Melbourne conference will go a long way to ensuring the level is brought down. Jodie McKay, NBN News. For years, the residents of Marsh Road at Bob's Farm have undertaken their own flood protection work, but they've now been told that if they want to stop their properties being inundated by nearby Tilligree Creek, they must lodge a development application with council and pay a $100 fee. In some cases, they may also be required to lodge an environmental impact statement. Today, residents met with Shire President Bob Horn. They want council and the Department of Planning to form a working party to examine their situation. In most cases, levee banks and sandbags are protecting the properties on Marsh Road. If they're not maintained, residents say the agricultural value of their land will suffer.
It's scenes like these that the fire brigade says are in danger of being repeated across the Hunter this summer.
We've had a fair amount of rain, there's been a lot of growth, and we believe that we're going to have a fairly serious summer season on our hands.
Last October, massive fires raged through Lake Macquarie, stretching the brigade and the bushfire service to the limit. This season, there'll be more pumps and equipment on hand. The brigade is hoping residents have learnt their lesson as well.
Keep their gutters clear, that they should have their garden hose connected, they should keep all their shrubs and any growth back 2 metres from their house, and if a fire comes through, that they should close their windows and close their doors and take safety precaution methods.
Also being targeted this week are household fires. And a reminder, there are safety devices available. Smoke detectors, the favoured item. The public will be given a better insight to the fire brigade during an open day at all stations this Saturday. Matthew White, NBN News.
The famous parrot is perched precariously these days. It all started in the back of a shop in Newcastle last century, the last bastion of the Aussie biscuit, first linked with Campbell's in the mid-80s. Now the American multinational plans to use Arnott's as a springboard into the Asian market. It's offering $8.80 a share, or $1.23 billion. At about the time of Federation, the Arnott's company had this advertising slogan: "One nation, one destiny, one biscuit." Well, now the American soup giant wants to pay big bickies for a bit of our heritage. Crumbs, Campbell's, you've gone too far. One person who isn't smiling, Harry Wallace, president of the Australian-owned Companies Association.
Well, I think it's a great disaster for Australia, because Arnott's is one of the few remaining icons which is left. Most of the others have gone.
The Foreign Investment Review Board may agree with him. At the moment, it restricts Campbell's to a 40% share in the biscuit empire. It could reject the bid. Politicians certainly agree. MPs have given up pork barrelling for biscuit barrelling in a bid to keep Arnott's Australian. It's hoped that the Campbell's bid will spark some Australian counter-offers. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
After a freight train came off the tracks near Brooklyn, bringing down overhead wires,
5 carriages overturned after the brakes locked up on the front wagon at 11:30 last night. Shuttle buses were used to ferry about 10,000 people between Gosford and Hornsby during this morning's peak, and while part of the track has now been reopened, delays of up to 30 minutes are expected. City Rail ran a special XPT train from Sydney to Newcastle late this afternoon, the first direct service since the derailment.
Lake Macquarie now has 2 rubbish tips, one at Redhead servicing East Lake residents and a Wobber dump covering the rest. The problem is Redhead is almost full. Mayor Doug Carley says council is considering 2 alternatives, either to buy a site and build a waste transfer station itself or to have Newcastle company Saywood construct and service the station. Under this deal, council would pay Saywoods $850,000 over the next decade in rent for the station. Mayor Carley believes this method would eventually be cheaper. The preferred site for the transfer facility is here at Gateshead, the finished station similar to this one in Sydney. All waste left at the Gateshead station by Eastlake residents would be transported to the Awabba tip. As for this practice shortening the 18-year life expectancy of Awabba, Mayor Carley says it will, but only by a few years, adding that one dump will adequately service the entire city.
We can separate garbage, for example, from the transfer stations for recycling purposes. So much less is going to be going into the Awabba dump from the eastern side of Lake Macquarie than was going into the Redhead dumps.
Despite this, aldermen aren't happy with the proposal and want more details before making a decision. It'll be debated at a special council meeting next Monday. Council is under pressure to make a decision soon. The Redhead tip is due to close in 18 months' time, and without a waste transfer station operating by then, Council could have a major garbage disposal problem on its hands. Catherine Lamond, NBN News. Port Stephen Shire councillors and senior staff were out inspecting the progress of their new home today. The $6.7 million council chambers is halfway complete, and council's property manager Peter McMahon says it's right on schedule. Local equipment and tradespeople have been employed for the project, and Mr McMahon says building works are within budget. The roof is to go on within the next few weeks, the builder expecting to hand over the completed complex by March next year, with council staff moved in by May. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Economic growth may be the stuff that Prime Minister Paul Keating's dreams are made of, but for the People's Republic of China, it's proving a headache. According to the Chinese ambassador to Australia, Shi Junlai, his country's annual growth rate is 9% and has to be slowed down.
We probably have to impose some brake to the possibly overheated economy.
Where to go with China's economy is a central issue at this week's Communist Party Congress in Beijing. The historic opening of China's doors to a market economy has been embraced, a move that Mr Shaw believes will strengthen Australia's trade links with his country.
I think that the two economies are highly complementary. We need a lot of things from Australia: iron ore, wool, wheat, and not only raw materials, but also technologies.
Only 3 years ago, China's attraction for foreign investors crumbled after the Tiananmen Square massacre. But the Chinese ambassador believes that incident has not caused any permanent damage in Sino-Australian relations.
That's already passed, and we should talk about the current cooperation and the future development of cooperation.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Macquarie Shire Council is now 12 months into its 4-year dust suppression campaign. It involves bitumen sealing rural and village roads as well as work on street shoulders.
We're spending about $900,000 this year, which is $500,000 on rural roads, a street in every village, around about $70,000 to $80,000, and the balance on the shoulders and laneways in Moree.
It's a large investment, but Councillor Jones believes it'll pay off in the long run.
We lose a lot of gravel throughout the Shire, and we feel over a 4-year program, if we can seal around 80 to 100 kilometres of roads in the Shire, that's going to save a big maintenance job with the gravel. And really, these bitumen streets, once they're done, they're pretty maintenance-free for a while.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News. This year, water storages in the Barwon region are low. This, in turn, affecting new season water allocations.
There's only 15% in the Namoy, 0 in the Guida, and sort of 5% of B allocations in the border rivers.
It's not, however, expected to have a large impact on domestic water use restrictions.
Domestic use is a high priority use, so what water we've got left, they have sort of first call on. And we're right, certainly for one season of domestic use.
And while monitoring the water flows, Mr McAllister says the department is on guard for a possible blue-green algae bloom.
There's sort of low flows in the river systems. As the water warms up, the nutrients are in the rivers anyway, and there'll be a few algae cells left from last year, which will sort of, if the conditions are right, can regenerate.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Organisations and individual women in the Hunter region. That is the industrial relations. That would then